Today, it's my great honor to have once again my friend, my mentor, my teacher, Daz Smith, the excellent remote viewer. I call him the archivist because he seems to have every piece of information out there about remote viewing. I'm going to get an update on his life and what's going on, not with just future forecasting, but in the world of remote viewing in general. Daz, so good to have you back on the show. How are you, sir?
Oh yeah, it's good to be chatting with you again. It's just seems like so long since we last did this. It's crazy.
I know, I know. We used to chat every single week, and then once I
Yeah,
moved on to the podcast, we don't have that same frequency to connect. So it's really nice. We're just chatting pre-show. So what's
yeah.
what's new and exciting in your world, Daz? I know you're still doing working with future forecasters. You guys have had some fascinating targets come up lately. What stands out right now that's big that's pending out there?
Well, yeah. The big one that stands out is one I'm waiting for is some kind of weird. Well, it might have happened today. But yeah, some kind of big kind of worrying event in July that we were picking up on. Some kind of luminous event
Uh,
that could kickstart some kind of new warlike kind of epochy type thing. Um,
was that the new luminosity event? I just talked to
yeah.
Sean about this last week. That's coming
Yes.
out. Yeah. So
Yeah,
you guys
that we
you
all
guys looked out ahead and ended up getting something that wasn't what was tasked again.
we did, and I weirdly I viewed the same thing twice, because we did a normal blind target, and the blind target
Right.
was to look at something that Cliff High had picked up,
Yes.
a free kind of peak event that was going to happen. I think he said mid-July, 15th of July. So we were doing that blindly as one future forecasting target.
Right.
But at the same time, in June, I was looking at, before I even did that target, I was looking at, July's top news, which is
Yes.
a month ahead, which just happened to be the exact same time zone of the Cliff High target.
Yeah.
And I described the exact same thing in that one. So I actually described the exact same thing in two different RV sessions with two different taskings, but essentially it was for the same date. And I didn't know
Yeah.
this.
You didn't know
Yeah.
being blind to that, I think, is huge because I think that's
Yes.
very compelling information.
Yeah. So I had all this, not very nice stuff, probably war-based kind of missile attack type based. And today, I mean, I think we got some feedback today in that um, it's just been reported, like over the last few hours, that um, Russia launched a huge amount of missiles at Ukraine, and they've bombed a children's hospital, and that's all over the news.
Oh man. And today's
And
July 8th, 2024, while we're
yeah,
recording
yeah.
this for anybody
And
watching.
in my news data, not my Cliff High data, in my news data, I said something was going to happen around about the 10th ish of
Oh,
July.
you're
So
close.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
very close on the date, and I'm guessing because I drew a scale like 1 to 30, and I'm kind of thinking, I'm like marking, oh, it's around about here, and this feels like the 10th ish, so it's as close as I could get. So I think that might be what we're seeing, unless it escalates even more, or we'll have to wait and see. But there could be even something else that happens within July. It wouldn't surprise me if we saw something that was connected to this, but slightly different that happened in July, which was even worse as well.
Was the rest of the team getting similar data on this?
Quite a lot of us were getting warlike escalation, distress, destruction, I think two or three of us had missile type data, or we had an object that was above ground, I should say, a vehicle type
Right.
object above ground crashing into something,
Yeah.
so I wrote missile in my news data, but it could also be something else.
So you've got a pretty good track record. I mean, the team does in predicting these kinds of things. Take the
Yeah,
luminosity out of it. I mean, we remember the Ukraine when that war kicked off. We had that. You had Lebanon, which was a huge hit for you. That giant mushroom cloud, right? We've had La
yeah,
Palma. That was just a natural event.
yeah.
How does this one rank in terms of compared to those events in terms of how it feels? Bigger, smaller, about the same? What are your thoughts?
It feels bigger, but bearing in mind, I'm also aware that in RV, I might over report something, so it feels bigger when I'm trying to
Right.
explore it in RV than the actual event usually happens by magnitude.
Right. And I think that's important to know. I have to say, you told me that years ago, right around the time of the Lebanon explosion, before it happened, because we used to get this data and freak the hell out for 6 weeks or whatever until the thing would come true, thinking the
Yeah.
world's going to end. As a viewer, I mean, we're putting ourselves there, right? We're
Yeah.
in that situation.
Yeah.
We're experiencing sometimes the emotions and the feelings. And for the people that are local to that event, it does feel like the end of the world.
Yeah,
But when we're
absolutely.
halfway across the world watching it on the news, it's a little bit different feel.
Yeah.
So, but
In
that's good to
RV at
stay
times,
grounded.
yeah, we
Yeah.
could literally be at the heart of an, if it's an explosion of some kind, we could be at the heart of the explosion or, within inches
Yeah.
of it. So,
Yeah.
what we're experiencing obviously feels bigger at the time than I think the events that come to pass, and that's not to
Yeah.
say that one day I might report a huge event and it might be a huge event. It's just
Right.
that my experience shows me that if I say it's going to be a TED, it usually ends up being something like a 6 or a 7 at this point in time.
Right. But I think that's huge to have that awareness. Because every so often I see the comments of like, "Oh, you guys are spreading fear," and I feel that we have always taken great care to share the scary thing for
Yeah,
to put the information out there but try to minimize it as best we can and like not trying to sell the scary
yeah,
piece of it. Like, here's what the data says, but here's my track record. It's probably not as bad.
absolutely. Yeah.
Where other
And
companies, I think, upsell it, and we try not to upsell
and
that.
if we didn't put it out there as well, we also get the same amount of people saying, why aren't you showing us everything you get? So
Right.
it is hard keeping this kind of ethical line
Yeah.
with everything we do. We don't want to scare people, but at the same time, they want the information, and we feel obligated to give them the information to make their own decisions.
It's a hard balance, right? Because
Yeah.
like you spent years and years crafting this ability and you willingly share this ability with the world, but then the world puts these expectations on you.
Yeah.
So now I have this obligation. I'm going to share it, but if I share it the wrong way, you're going to be mad. If I feel that it's inappropriate to share it, you're going to be mad. Like you can't win. You got to really, I mean,
Absolutely.
what's your secret or what's your threshold in making that decision?
It's hard. You're just caught in the middle. You just try. I have to be as what I do anyway. Try to be as honest as I can with her. At this, because not everything we do happens. We do have a very good
Right.
hit rate, and the majority of
Right.
things do happen. But luckily, they happen as we're discussing, usually at a magnitude less than what we're describing in the RV,
Yeah.
which is. My thank God kind of moment, really, because if it was at the
Yeah.
same magnitude, then I probably would be a bit more worried.
Yeah, and that takes its toll, I think, on our mental health. I mean, there were times where there was big stuff in the news every week, remember? And we were pretty
Yeah.
fried.
And it's hard
Um,
now as well, because there's so many wars and potential conflicts going on. At the moment, doing this monthly news thing and thinking to yourself, shit, I got to do next month's news, and I'll have to do it again in like a week and a half's time.
yeah, it's
You
coming
sat
up.
down at the desk, you're thinking, oh, I got to describe what next month's news is going to be, and instantly you start picking up feelings and stuff. But when you're getting like the more gruesome, hardcore kind of stuff that that's already in the news, you're like
Yeah,
you're trying to censor yourself at the same time. But if you do you censor yourself, there is a good chance that you're censoring valid information. So it's a
yeah.
very tricky situation. It is so noisy to try to work in that
That's
kind of environment.
and it's hard. I mean, for those that don't remote view, you're trying to figure out what's my imagination from the front loaded data
Yes.
and my own analysis and what is true data because your imagination tries to mimic
Yeah.
what the signal line feels like. I just had an experience the other day. I was driving and I this song came on the radio and I thought it was a different song, right? It just clicked. I was like, oh, it's this song. And I said, oh, no, it's not this song. Maybe that song's going to come on in the future. And I said to myself, you know what? Nope, that's just my mind being triggered by this one song. And I'm making psychic conclusions that don't exist. So I went to the store and I came back. And when I hit the same exact intersection, that song came on the radio. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. That was a psychic moment. I did predict this song coming on in the same spot, just on the return trip back. So it was a really weird thing to try to figure, because at first I was leaving going, okay, that was just my imagination.
Yeah.
But no, on the way back, I realized, no, that was valid data coming in.
Excellent.
But it's hard. It's hard
It is.
differentiating those things.
Yeah, as we know, as we're discussing, there's so much going on. Like, and it's not just the war stuff. Last week I had an election here in the UK,
Here
so I
comes
got a new
politics.
government.
Yeah.
France
Yeah.
had one yesterday. They were very close to becoming a right wing government, but at the last minute that changed. We got the Hope Biden Trump thing going on in the US. Will
Yeah.
Biden run or not?
Right.
It's
Right.
that alone is hugely messy. From some of the most influential countries in the world. Let alone what's
Right.
happening with China, Taiwan, Ukraine,
Right.
Russia. Crazy.
And with the emotional psychic noise that comes out around something like an election, right? Because now you've got all these different beliefs that are out there. Oh, he's going to win. He's going to win. And elections are usually pretty close. And I think from what we're finding about the future is it's not necessarily written, right? There's a path that it's on, but it's a
Absolutely.
probability is what I think we're starting to piece together with remote
Yeah.
viewing, or maybe we're jumping timelines. Who knows? Whatever the theory is out there, it's pretty volatile. So it's hard to look at emotionally charged events like that, I think, and get a good answer.
Absolutely. Yeah. What it looks like is it's very fluid. Um,
Yeah.
and everything's impacted by humans and what humans say, think, and do. And on some of these bigger things, when you got millions or even billions of people on each side of an equation, all wanting a certain outcome, that's having an effect on pushing and pulling these future
Yeah.
probabilities.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes it tough. Sean and I were talking about this one luminosity event where I guess you guys are looking out beyond 2050,
Yes.
and how fuzzy it gets the further out you go, and how easy it is to get distracted by that big bright luminous thing that stands
Yeah.
between you and the target date of 2050.
Yeah.
Especially
Absolutely.
if the target's like a fuzzy target too. It's like, will this
Yeah,
happen? Will this
and
not?
there may be other things in play as well. For example, we have to consider the possibility that several of us, as we're getting older, might not be physically here in 2050. So we might not have physical feedback because we just might not exist. Because sometimes it
Yeah.
might be RV might be that you're actually just reporting your future feedback from you experiencing it in the future. But for me, that's like another 25 years. And for Dick, it's another
Right.
25 years as well. And Dick's older than I am, so there's all these possibilities as well that we just might not be here to experience the feedback that's gonna come about from these events.
Do you think that's possible? A possible indicator then? I mean, and that's assuming that we're not actually going to the target. Then we're reporting off of the feedback. Would you say?
Well, that's one of the theories out there, and that's a theory that Joe McMoneagle and Ed May and several others think is happening. Is everything we're
Right.
getting here is just pre-GOG information. So we're going into the future and just looking at what they essentially call the score sheet, and then just getting the data from
Yeah.
there.
And I think there's some credibility behind that. I mean, I've been working on establishing a connection with my own future consciousness. I do monthly sessions, and even working some of the target pools online. What I found I needed to do was create my own target ID and then connect myself to the moment I get feedback in my mind. And I'm looking at, I want to get information from the target, not from myself. But because when I was just using the target ID numbers, I was getting so much noise. It's the weirdest thing
Yeah,
when I use my own numbers, which are randomly generated all within
yeah.
protocol. But I find I have a little bit more success. But how do you account for that information that we get that we don't get feedback for? That's just, is that just luck? Is that just a guess? Is that
Well, I don't know the exact properties of the theory, but Ed May and the others say that the information doesn't have to be us that's getting it; it just has to be there somewhere. So
meaning
we don't
somebody
actually have
else
to.
can?
Yeah, just because we don't see the score sheet still exists and it's still
Okay,
connected out there. So we are still just going ahead and getting information from the score sheet in some
right,
way.
right. But
Whoever got access to that score sheet.
so like we looked at Henny's target. Was that Kepler 452b, that one planet, right?
Yeah,
And some of us had life data on that. As of right now,
yeah,
we don't know if life exists on that planet. It may be 100 years before they're able to confirm that. So even if we're all gone and someone else in the future goes back and says, "Hey, these guys remote viewed it, and here's the verifiable data," that will complete the loop, we think.
hopefully, yes. Again, this is all fluid. We don't know. We don't know what's
Right, right.
going on.
Just talking
And
what's
I have a
possible.
sneaky feeling that it's not just one thing going on. That it might be like three or four
Yeah,
intersecting things. So there's not just one theory that fits. And
agreed.
maybe the side process. If one of the components is not in place, it finds a different route. Almost
Finds
like
another way.
Yeah, when you're using sat nav and you go down the wrong route, it then redirects
Yeah.
you. You know, it recalculates and redirects a new route. I have a feeling there's an intelligence behind the process that's doing that. So yeah, if the route changes, it recalculates and finds a new route to whatever the information is.
I feel like sometimes the more I do it and the more I watch you guys do it, it seems like we're querying a giant database. Especially when you watch Edward with his method, the way he questions and asks questions and he gets information back. I mean, it reminds me of the old days when I was learning how to do search queries and like Google and stuff,
Yeah,
how to request information to ask the right questions. If your instrument's tuned
yeah,
properly, you know, you're
yeah.
going to get data back. And I
It
think
does.
that could tie into these Akashic records, right?
Yeah, it does feel like that. That's how in my head, that's how I equate it to be. I don't, if like the target is Mars, pyramids on Mars or whatever, I don't think
Right.
I'm actually in any way traveling to Mars and seeing any pyramids. I think I'm just accessing this universal information thing, almost like a
Right.
universal AI, a universal chat GTP kind of thing.
Right, that's
So
how
I'm
it
just,
feels. I agree. I'm
yeah.
on a similar page with that. So then when but we have those fully immersive spirit experiences sometimes, right? So that's like stepping into a VR, would you say?
It can be. I think it depends how you set your intent in your mind up.
Right.
Because it's different. It's different from by target and by
Right.
someone's thought processes. There's so many variables in play. Their history, their background, all that kind of stuff. So again, it's malleable. It's almost like if one route doesn't fit, the
Yeah.
sat nav recalculates and finds a route that does fit.
So if we're not going to the actual target location, right? We're either querying our future consciousness or the score sheet, or we're querying some record of it, the
Yeah.
database. What are your thoughts on things like remote influencing?
Well, here's the thing. I think that once someone somewhere within the experiment sets the key in play that something is going to be influenced, then I think the route changes to something that is a bit more uh, active. How I see remote viewing nowadays. I see the majority of remote viewing we do when we're looking at past and present targets. I think that generally sets the intention and the sat nav route for what I call
Right.
passive information
Passive.
gathering.
Just get the
Yeah,
data.
it's data that's there. It's past. It's just there. I think then that if you do a different type of experiment like we're doing when we're looking ahead to the news, and if you wanted to remote view and influence something or have a conversation with someone, maybe a grey alien at a base or something like that, I think then a different switch is taken and the approach is more active.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a completely different set of things that are, set of junctions that are in play on that kind of thing because the intent made it so.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I've done like if you just work with intuitives, right? For whether it's for healing or for gathering data, I mean, you can impact somebody like you and I could impact each other with the right intention and the right openness, really.
Yes.
So we're not hitting a database. That's real time. That's us working, you
Yes.
know, together to
And
do that, or
as I said,
even setting.
I think it comes down to
Yeah.
the mind of the people involved, the intent. When we're doing
Right.
normal RV, our intent really isn't there to influence or do anything in real time to get information. It's essentially our intent is I just need the information. So I think the majority of remote viewing is set passively by our intent. But
Right.
I think that sometimes we can flip a switch instantaneously if we want, and our intent then makes it active instead of passive, and it's a whole different set of information I think that's happening there.
Now, is that something that a decision that needs to be made on the spot during a session? I mean, because you don't want to front load yourself and say, I'm going to go back and I'm going to influence so and so to make this decision, right?
I think I think you can, if you want, if that's your intent, and
Yeah.
you set that as your intent and purpose. I think you could do that. You could flip a switch through RV. You could say, okay, I'm not going to be passive anymore. This is it. I'm now at a target. I'm now going to move
Right.
into someone who's physically there, right here and now at that target, and get their data. So I think you
Uh,
can flick a switch and do it. Again, I think the whole process of what we're doing with RV, not just RV, but anything psychic or anything
yeah.
creative, everything, the whole everything that we do as human beings, it all depends on that very subtle meaning or the intent behind the action that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're spot on with that. I mean, intent um, really makes all the difference in the world in what you're
Yeah,
looking at and how you're manifesting things, what your feelings are
yeah,
around what it is that you're doing.
yeah.
I'm trying to think of how to set that up blindly. And it'll be really hard because the viewer would have to know that they're becoming active versus passive, right? Regardless of what the
But
tasking
you
is.
could blindly, you could do one target. You could say, you could send like, I could send you to say I'm trying to think, a past target wouldn't be so good. Yeah, I could send you to, I don't know, Area 51,
Uh-huh.
let's say, um, 20 years ago as a target and say, okay, you do this blind. So you didn't know, you wouldn't know you were Area 51 20 years ago, looking when Bob Lazar that was there and seeing what he was doing. And then I could, you could start describing data, getting your usual stuff. And then I could retask you. I could say, and you don't need to know that I'm retasking you. Move forward to present time right now and go inside the head of the director of Area 51 and get me his secrets.
Okay. So you're actively collecting information,
Yeah, I
right?
could, I
But
could, I could still make you be blind, but I could
correct.
then move you from passive to active information gathering.
But it's still passive in the sense of we're not influencing his decisions and his actions, right? Could you task somebody, and maybe we're
Well,
getting
I could
muddy
task
waters
it.
here.
Yeah, I could task you to, maybe influence his decisions. So I could say, okay, now move forward to, 1 year in the future. Not, yeah, I could say, no, let's move. I want you. You don't know this because it's blind, but on the sheet of paper that I write down, it could say, you're now going. The remote viewer is now going to move to 2025.
Uh-huh.
They're going to move inside the mind of the director of operational programs at Area 51. And I want to place in their mind the mindset that they really want this information to be out there, and they're either going to accidentally or on purposely leak this information as much as possible.
Wow. And the viewer would do that without being really aware that that's what they're doing.
Yeah, but that would be, I think that would be quite unethical to do, to use a viewer in that
100%
regard.
unethical. Yes. For
But
the viewer
there's,
and for the person. Yeah.
yeah, just for purposes of conversation. That's why you got to be careful who you're working with. There's no
Right.
reason why a tasker that's got a bad ethical view couldn't do make you do that as a remote viewer.
You know that we're getting into the woo right now, Daz, but I can think of a few situations in my life where I had to make key pivotal decisions.
Yeah.
And I made choices that weren't in line with what I was intending to do. And I felt foggy as it was happening. And then later was like, man, why did I do that? Like just something comes over. And I don't think, I mean, maybe, but I don't think a remote viewer was going back in time. But I mean, maybe there's some other mechanism, some other
Yeah.
puppet
Well,
masters that are driving us in different directions.
I also believe now, and I think we may have discussed this in the past, that I think, or it's my experience so far, that there is some kind of I don't know what to call it, but there is some kind of intelligence behind what we're doing with the remote viewing process as well. For
Yeah.
something to be able to know, like, when look, if we use that sat nav scenario we were using earlier, where you're going down one route and you find you're going wrong, and then if you turn the wrong corner, it then recalculates and give you a new route. There's an intelligence behind something that makes that recalculation. It kind of know it says, okay, he's gone down the wrong route. We now need to recalculate to get him down the right route. That
Right.
happens in RV so much that there must be an intelligence behind it that recalculates the different routes that it's making us take.
Do you think that intelligence is intelligent in terms of it's reacting, or do you think it's intelligent like it's thinking ahead and guiding us?
Well, I think both. I think it's both reacting to situations, but also I think that it feels like there is a plan for each of us, and if
Yeah.
we individually take the wrong route that takes us in down the wrong place, that's not what we're meant to be doing, that the process tries to get us back on route, a bit like that sat nav. So, for example, you know, my wrong route would be I want 100 million on to win in my bank account from the Euro Millions lottery.
Right.
So, I'd be going down my route saying, I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to do RV to win 100 million because that's what I want. I want 100 million from the Euro Millions lottery. But I feel that there may be something out there and it's part of the process that kind of knows what my true route is and knows that that would take me in the wrong direction. And I may never do what I need to do. And it might
Yeah.
redirect me without me knowing.
I mean, that ties in. I mean, the movie Final Destination and some others have played on this, right? The future will correct itself, even if you make subtle changes. And so it's like you save this person's life, and then they walk outside the next day and get hit by a bus, right?
Yes.
To break it down,
If we're if if we're here for a reason, and that's what religion and everything, people that have near-death experiences, all this kind of stuff say, we're here to learn something or do something over multiple generations. We don't know what that is, but if that works out to be true, and it looks like it's prevalent for everything when you look into this kind of stuff, then there's a mechanism that must try to get us on that pathway. Otherwise, we would all be going down the wrong pathways and getting everything we always wanted.
I mean, yes, unless there's so much competition for that, which there is, right? I mean, just to play devil's advocate.
Again, there are other variables in play with all this as well.
Right.
There are several billion people who also want to win that 100 million on lottery at the same
And
time
there's
that
only
I
so
do.
much to go around.
Yes.
So in looking at this, though, I mean, now we're coming back to, and I bring this up in a lot of discussions, like the fate versus free will. Because a minute ago, we're like, yeah, the future is variable. It changes, right? How far does it change? If everybody has a preset path, that means that the future has a predetermined route where it's trying to go, right?
I think the future is malleable in that it can
Right.
bend.
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure it's absolutely changeable. As I said, I think there are multiple things going on with multiple intelligences, and
Yeah.
you know, we may have where we want to go individually, but there also may be
Correct.
something on a more spiritual level that's trying to push us down a slightly different pathway.
Yeah.
But there may be other variables in play, other non-human life forms and other things out there that are also trying to bend us and make us go down different
Right.
pathways because that's their will. Do you know what I mean?
I mean,
I think it's so many strings to this. It's not. I don't think it's black and white. It's a
no. Well, there's so much we don't understand, right? Like we don't even really know what we are, what
yeah
this universe is, what the bigger picture is, right?
yeah
And we don't even understand time itself. I mean,
absolutely yeah
and once you get into altered states of consciousness, there is no time. Time doesn't exist, or the past, present, and future exist simultaneously. So if everything has already happened, then how do you really change what's already occurred, right?
yeah.
It's a very confusing
It is
soup to try
confusing.
to swim
Gives
through.
me a headache to think about it, but
Yeah.
I have to entertain, that there does seem all this does seem to be going on. I think we have a little bit of free will, but I think there's something that's determined in what we're doing as well. And I think there are other beings and life forms out there that also have an interplay, and they can sway things. And I'm not saying that any of this stuff can make you do complete left or right turns abruptly.
Right.
I'm talking about very subtle kind of variances of waves that make subtle changes to what everything we're doing.
I think, as humans, we think about like, oh, they're going to change the future. It's going to be this one event that's going to create this ripple effect. Like I'm going to put off a bomb, or I'm going to have a natural event or something big, right? That's going to make all these changes. But if you're thinking of a higher intelligence that's looking at the whole of humanity, and you think of
Yeah.
things like the chaos theory and the butterfly effect,
Yeah.
if you influence this person over here and this person over here, and you go back 500 years and you influence this little
Yeah.
detail here, it creates a gradual ripple effect that you
Yeah.
might not really notice as an abrupt
Absolutely.
change in the timeline.
Yeah.
So where did this change happen? Well, it was spread out across
Yeah. It might be
multiple points in time.
10, 25, 50 little nudges.
Yeah.
I'd say
Yeah.
that's how it works. It's subtle nudges
Right.
from different parts of the universe that are always pushing and pulling in different
Yeah.
directions to try to get all of us
Which
to
is something we can't calculate on our own
no.
with, I think, with a single human mind. I think a larger, like an AI or a collective
Yeah.
would be better equipped to look at those kinds of variables, which brings us into things like the simulation argument stuff, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that was Nick Bostrom's principles, right? They ancestry people, if they reach that state, they would run a simulation argument. He called it an ancestry simulation, where
Yeah.
then they could go back and change things and see what happens, right? So if you have that perspective of I'm playing this video game, looking at the past, these records that I have, and I'm going, how do I make this event happen? Well, let's try changing these little things and
Yeah.
see how it ripples through time, which could very well be our existence. How do you feel about stuff like that? How does that make you feel?
I don't know. I try not to think about it too much, because it really hurts my head thinking about it, because it's so complex. It's just that, it's just the little things I notice in day-to-day life, like, when we're doing RV, and as you know, when you get a group of RVers working the same project, there is something there that carves up the project and says, you do this bit, you do that bit, you do this bit. We'll have a bit of crossover here. But even that alone, there's, it's not that's not random. It's never random, because it happens
too often.
Yeah, it happens every single time. So it's just little things like that lead me to, to not belief. It's not belief. It's my experience that there is an underlying intelligence there, and I don't know what that intelligence is. And then when you think, okay, if there is an intelligence there, then it's got to be there for a reason. And why is it there? And as I said, the simple things like all the top really amazing remote viewers that I've known and we all hear about over time. None of them have won 100 million on the lottery or anything like that. Yeah. And that alone is not a coincidence. When you're talking about people that can go anywhere in time and space, but they can't do something that affects their life in such a drastic way with huge amounts of money, then you have to say, okay, why can't they do that? There must be something. There must be a block or a mechanism there somewhere.
Edward and I had a good conversation about this a few months back, and because we were looking at the initial experiments of RV, right? And you had what did you call the newness factor, or I forget how he worded it, but they were making money the first time they tried that experiment on they were playing the stock market. Yeah, and then but it was very hard for them to repeat it after that. And part of it might be just the emotional aspect of it. Once you're vested, once like this is what I'm doing, and I'm going to try to get some money out of it. It could make it could influence. We talked about how subtle it is sometimes between your own imagination and the signal line. I mean, it might be.
I think I've said many times, I would love to have 100. I'd love to use my RV to win the 100 million on the Euro millions every week. They do it. But as an honest person, I know that if I did actually use RV and I won 100 million and had that in my bank account, then I know who I am as a person, and I wouldn't be in future forecasting group anymore. I wouldn't be doing teaching RV or anything like that anymore, because I would literally be spending the money island hopping for the rest of my life with my own yacht.
Right.
And maybe that, although that would be a fantastic life and it'd be great for me to do, maybe that's just not what my life is meant to be about. It's not my pathway.
Well, I think you're spiritually driven. You're not financially driven. I mean, we'd all want the money. I would benefit from that money tremendously, and I'd love it.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I would give like 75 million of 100 million to Sci research. I'd set up the biggest scientific lab possible with the top scientists in the world. But again, that might the mere fact that that's in my head, that I would literally spend huge chunk of money to make all the world's top scientists spend the next 20 years looking at Sci research. Maybe that's not what the universal plan is for humans.
That's not what it wants. That's not what it wants.
It would be too much too fast, and I would maybe me doing that would step in motion something that would be detrimental or even good for humans. But that's not part of the plan. So maybe just that act alone, me knowing to myself that I would set up the biggest kick-ass RV science program ever. Maybe that's the thing that's something out there saying, whoa, no, we can't do that. So that's not within the capabilities of this path. So let's nudge Daz in a slightly different direction.